the biggest tool you're going to learn while you're in this program, in the sense that think of all of the knowledge and the tools that you're going to learn during your 3, 4, 5 years here. This is the methodology you're going to be using in terms of applying that knowledge. That's what cases do. They basically give you the opportunity to apply material that you're learning, to try to see how these tools are actually applied in a concrete way in business, in industry. A lot of the tools in cases as well are very similar to approaches used in industries like consulting. Like for example, when you think of consulting and you walk into an organization, a business, and they have a problem. They hired you for a reason, they're having an issue. They don't really know what's causing the problem, they don't really know what the solution is going to be, but they hire you to solve it. The same type of approach that you generally take in that type of an environment is exactly the same in terms of what you're going to be doing here, in terms of case studies. Trying to understand the environment, trying to understand all of the variables. Will you always have all of the information that you possibly need? No, you won't. Just like in real life in industry, if all of the information was always readily available, there wouldn't be a need for consulting as an industry, right? Because every company would be able to solve those problems on their own. So just think of it from that regard. Now we're going to go through somewhat of a standardized approach, considering for a lot of you this is going to be the first crack at going through a case analysis. So we're going to look at some of the main components you should be covering. We'll look at some concrete examples of actual presentations that teams I've coached have put together, just to give you some real examples to look at and not just walk out of here with theory. I'm not an extremely theory-oriented guy. I tend to be fairly hands-on and practical in that regard. And by all means, if there's questions, let me know. Just pick up your hand and I'll find an opportunity to have you ask. Good? Okay. There's different types of cases you can get. In the sense that you could have a decision case. All this means is it's a type of case where an organization or an individual or a business owner has a decision to make. And has a decision to make among 2 or 3 different options, right? Like say for example, putting it in a concrete way, you can be a small business owner that's looking to open up a restaurant in Montreal. There's 3 potential options you have on where your location's going to be. You have to conduct an analysis. You're going to weigh the pros and cons of each potential option. Some of them might be more expensive, but there's higher traffic. Other ones have higher traffic, but it's a smaller location, and so on, until you make a decision and ultimately locate your business where you decide, right? Similar type of approach. A problem case is a situation in which you need to diagnose a specific problem or issue a business owner, an organization is having. One of the areas that most students get stumped when they initially start going through cases is misdiagnosing the problem. And we're going to get to that in a moment. We're going to deep dive a little bit into that specific topic. And evaluation cases, where you look at specific reasons why an organization is succeeding or failing, which you're not going to cover as much within this program. Generally, cases you're going to see throughout the program are generally going to be decision cases or problem cases. I would think in a lot, and when you see problem cases, it could also be an opportunity. A problem could simply be a decision that a business owner needs to make in terms of best possible option, but they don't know what their options are, right? So don't think of problem necessarily as they're being negatively impacted by something and you need to fix it. It can go way beyond that. So some initial tips when you first start reading the case, and you might think to yourselves, it's just reading a case. There's some tips I can offer you in terms of how do you systematically go through a case to make the most of your time. In the sense, Initially, and it's something that's worked for a lot of students, it's something that works for myself as well, skim it. Just see what the headings are, what appendices are included, just to get a sense of what it is you're looking at. Very simple. Then go back, start going through the case carefully, step by step. Underline, write little notes for yourselves, highlight, really break down the details of the case. Anything that you may think is relevant. With me so far? Okay. So as I said, making a lot of notes, circling the important. Don't just highlight, because ultimately you want to be able to go back to some of those notes to help guide your analysis when, as a team, you're discussing amongst yourselves. So if everybody's thorough and they actually take down these notes, somebody might actually catch something that someone else didn't. And that's where you can really start complementing efforts. Now, this is somewhat the methodology and approach you'll be taking. You read a case, step by step. Then, when you're actually structuring it together and structuring the case, whether it be in paper format for you to submit for an assignment, or a presentation for the case challenge that you'll have within this event. Introduction. And they have to present this in front of people, right?
In front of probably
Great.
4 judges.
So you're going to introduce yourselves, you're going to introduce your colleagues, you're going to introduce the case. Simple enough. Good? Your current situation and context. Now, be very, very careful. When I say current situation and context, it's not regurgitating just the facts of the case, but it's creating a context for your presentation. It's creating the foundation for where the presentation will evolve to. Does that make sense to everybody? Like, don't just say, I'm here because such and such business owner gave me X, Y, and Z graphs, and the situation as they described it is this. You don't need to regurgitate the case. In the current situation and context, you're also analyzing, it could be potential trends, it could be the challenges the business or the business owner is facing. And ultimately, this is going to lead to your problem or opportunity statement. Now, your problem or opportunity statement, your problem is either going to be something you need to solve, or your opportunity, what type of an opportunity is it you're trying to take advantage of? Like, for example, you might have identified through your analysis that there's a certain gap in the market for certain unfulfilled needs that no other company is currently fulfilling. There are certain customer segments that nobody's tailoring to. That's not a problem, that's an opportunity. And your job is trying to figure out how best to take advantage of that opportunity, how best to meet that customer need, considering nobody else is going after that segment. So that's where you're going back and forth in terms of problem or opportunity statement. Now, we'll go into a little bit of detail in terms of the problem definition, but this is extremely important in the sense that it's going to be the foundation for your entire presentation. So you want to be very, very specific in how you define the problem. The way you define the problem is obviously going to dictate what your analysis will be that will follow, what alternatives you perceive based on the problem you've identified, what recommendation you think is going to actually solve that specific problem, and ultimately how are you going to implement the solution that you've recommended to solve that problem. So it's extremely important. Now, if I were to just ask you, does this sound like a problem statement? Procter & Gamble's sales for detergent went down 10%. Why?
When it's not specific, you're not saying why it happened.
That's exactly it. That's a symptom of a problem. Sales just going down isn't the problem. What's causing those sales to go down is the problem. So if you define the problem as sales are going down, then your entire strategy is going to revolve around, well, how do we increase sales? It could be introducing new products. It could be expanding to new markets. It could be, hiring more salespeople. It could be decreasing the price of products so you can increase volume. But would that solve the problem? No. Right? The problem could be an internal inefficiency. The problem could be that there's something wrong with the current product offering that they have for a particular segment. The problem could be a new competitor just entered the market that's killing them in that particular segment. So if you've defined the problem as sales are going down, and then everything is revolving around how do we increase sales, you're never going to actually address the core problem that's causing those sales to go down. Does that make sense so far? Good? Okay. So the current situation, as I said, you're creating a context. Don't just summarize, right? And you have to keep in mind whether you're presenting in a classroom in front of your professor, or you're presenting in front of judges, the way you will at this event. They've read the case. They know the case. So it's not just about wasting a third of your time regurgitating the facts, but creating a foundation. This is the current situation. This is what we're facing. This is what's happening in the market. This is what's brought us here today to analyze this specific situation, right? So you're creating that context, understanding the environment, both internal and external, understanding internal dynamics at play, as well as understanding external dynamics, such as competition, and so on. Or it could be government, for example, from an external environment point of view. Current trends, it could be changing consumer behavior trends, new competitive forces, it could be deregulation in a specific industry, so that's obviously extremely relevant. Understanding market sizing. You'll learn a little bit more about this as you progress throughout the program. All market sizing refers to is, how do you evaluate how big a specific segment for your product is? And it's as simple as, say for example, if I were to say, what do you think the market size is for people buying lattes in Quebec? How big of a market do you think this is? How would you approach that type of a question? How would you try to evaluate what the size of that is? That's all the information I'm giving you. I'm not giving you charts, I'm not giving you graphs, I'm not giving you anything. How would you analyze that? Any ideas? How would you try to estimate?
Try with the bigger picture. So let's say here is Quebec, so we start with Quebec population, let's say, and then go on with the characteristics.
Sure, and a lot of it's going to be based on assumptions. What's important in case studies, every one of you here is an individual. You all have your own perspective in terms of how you're going to evaluate any information you're given. You're all going to have a different perspective. You all have different backgrounds, right? So what's important is stating the assumptions that you have. Like for example, we can say, oh, I estimate there's 12 million people that live in Quebec, right? And that's my assumption. And you can say, well, I estimate that 50% of the Canadian market drinks coffee. I think Quebec is a little more European than the rest of Canada. So I estimate it to be 70% that drink coffee, a little bit higher than the national average. Well, 70% of 12 million. That's your initial. Then you can say, well, of those individuals, I think only 40% would be willing to spend $4 or $5 for a coffee as opposed to $2 for a coffee, right? Just because 50 or 70% drink coffee doesn't mean they're all willing to say buy a $4 coffee or a $5 coffee. So it's all estimates. And then when you break it down smaller and smaller, you get to the point where you say, I estimate my segment to be 2 million people. If your segment is 2 million people and this cup of coffee costs $5, that's a $10 million segment. That's what the market is worth to you. So it's just understanding, and this is what the program, this is what marketing courses you're going to take are going to train you to do. How can you look at a situation with imperfect information, apply logic, and try to understand how to come to these types of conclusions? Because put yourself in a business environment where you're asked to make decisions based on whatever information you have. You're not going to have the luxury of telling your boss, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have that chart, so I can't really give you an opinion. Right? You're going to have to find a way to base an assessment or a judgment based on the information that you need. You're going to have to make an assessment as to what information you do need, and so on, and then apply logic to be able to make those types of decisions. By the end of this, you might say, wow, only a $10 million market. Well, the business I was thinking of is going to cost me $8 million just to get off the ground. How much market share do I actually need to have within the first 3 years of this business to break even? Maybe it's not worth it anymore. Maybe I want to look at other options now that I assessed how big of an opportunity that particular segment was. So it's using this type of logic. You're with me so far? Okay, so you've read the case, you're starting to discuss as a team, what's the current situation, what's the current context? Those are going to be your initial couple of slides to kind of break it down in tangible form. Just a little snapshot, you don't have to worry so much about this. This is the first kick of the cat, so to speak. So nobody's expecting financial analysis or a numbers analysis, but this goes through exactly the example I just gave, right? Market sizing, number of customers, how many purchases they would make, and so on, just to get to a number. Now, is all of that information always going to be readily available? No. Now, analyzing your environment. In terms of analyzing the environment, part of the situation, part of the current context, sometimes I've seen teams present an analysis of the environment and different variables prior to stating the problem statement. Sometimes I've seen it following the problem statement. There's no black and white rule that says it needs to be before or after. It's a judgment call based on how you've read the case and how you're developing a strategy on presenting that case. So you might feel, well, if I really present the analysis of the environment before I present the problem, then that can actually lead me into the problem statement. Or you might think, let me just illustrate the problem, and then I'm going to analyze the environment, which is going to lead into the alternatives I'm going to present the judges, or my professor, or my client. Make sense so far? So there's a lot of different models here, a lot of which you've probably never seen or heard of before, right? Yes? No? We'll start with a simple one, which is a simple one that you can use for this specific case, whether you've gone through cases or not. A SWOT analysis. It's a very, very good initial tool or model to use in analyzing the case. And it'll help you, actually, it'll help you lead, to your, understanding of the case. Like, for example, what does SWOT stand for? Strengths and weaknesses are always internal. Opportunities and threats are always external. So by going through a SWOT analysis, you go through an internal analysis and you go through an external analysis. Make sense so far? Now, one important thing here, which is a huge oversight by most individuals. Don't just simply put in a small little phrase as, the company has a $20 million budget, so this is a strength. So what? Get into the habit of asking yourself that every time you're identifying something as a strength or a weakness or an opportunity or a threat. Because, for example, just stating the company has a $20 million budget. If their competitors have a $50 million budget, is it a strength? No. If their expenses are even higher than their budget, or they've been losing money for the past 5 years and they're on the verge of bankruptcy, is it still that big of a strength? If they have experience in misallocating their budgets in the past, is a budget of 20 million necessarily a strength? No. Draw conclusions from your analysis. Like, for example, it could be company X has a $20 million budget for this specific initiative that far exceeds the current competition in that segment, that will give us an opportunity, if executed properly, to gain market share in that particular target market segment. Now it's a strength. Just 20 million alone as a budget is not a strength. Make sense? An internal weakness could be lack of management. It could be lack of machinery or manufacturing capability if we're talking about having to manufacture a product. It could be internal marketing inefficiency. It could be a lack of resources. All of these things could be internal weaknesses. External opportunities are some of the examples I gave you earlier. It could be an untapped market. It could be an opportunity to expand to a new country. So geographically, it could be an opportunity to purchase property in a specific state with really good terms given by the government. All of these could be deemed opportunities. A threat could be competition, new entrants in the market, deregulation could be a threat. Like, for example, Bell Canada here in Canada once had a monopoly in their segment. They were extremely inefficient when they were a monopoly, but are extremely efficient today. But once there was deregulation, and they were told, well, within this time frame, all these U.S. competitors are going to enter the market, and you suddenly don't have a 100% monopoly anymore, let me tell you, that was a threat. They needed to take a step back and think of how they're going to reorganize their entire company to be able to address these new competitors coming into the market. Just think of an organization like Hydro-Quebec that has a monopoly on energy within Quebec. If suddenly there was a competitor, think of the pressure that would put on them to say, wow, we really got to figure out a way to get a lot more efficient. What if the competitors come in and they can offer similar product offerings at half of our price? How are we going to adapt to that? That's a threat. Make sense so far? So as part of your analysis of the environment and in understanding the case, and it could be in your case study as well, and I'll show you some slides of how that can actually look visually on a slide, it's a good first tool to use. A very good first tool. Perceptual maps. Has anybody heard of a perceptual map or a positioning map? How would it help?
It kind of shows you like where you want to go with things, like where you are and where you want to go, right?
It helps show you where you want to go in the sense that it could identify certain gaps. The way a perceptual map works, and I believe I should have, let's see if there's, okay. One example. This is an example that came from a case that was just about this small website, the small company that had certain product offerings. They were looking at, trying to target different segments for. In terms of say individuals that were moving, that needed a resource to find movers, to find services in the new place they're moving to, and this was the case. So in analyzing it, they were able to look at this and say, well, how can we break down that market, that segment? Who are our main competitors in this segment? If you're looking, say, to rent an apartment in a certain part of Montreal, what options do you have? You can go on blogs, you can go on forums, you can look at postings, that might be here on campus. You have different resources. If you're looking for a mover, if you're looking for initial cleaners, if you're looking for a place to make an extra set of keys, if you're, all of these things, right? If you're looking for just very basic information about moving, you can just go online and look at very generic sites. That's an option. And the way they divided this particular map, you basically choose your own criteria. And that's the beauty of this. Every single one of you, if I gave you an industry like the automotive industry, and I told you pick 2 sets of criteria to evaluate that industry in, every one of you would probably have a very different positioning chart. And that's fine, right? You're able to evaluate an industry in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different, using a lot of different methods. So by looking at this, they focused on, here's one axis, transactional versus relational. Some resources that were available to somebody just moving to a new city or a new province. Some of them were very transactional. I just go there, get the information, it's very generic, I might be able to use 1 or 2 things, that's it. Other ones were very relational in the sense that you can interact with other individuals in a forum. You can ask questions, get answers. So it's a lot more collaborative of a relationship than just going online to a web page and jotting down some information. Then they looked at specialized versus general. You might go on, say, a McGill website that has 1,000 different links for things. And one of those links happens to be information on housing. Or you can go to a very specialized site that only deals with housing. Right? So they were using this to try to map out different competitive threats that they thought existed in that particular market. And what they found was there was nothing in the extremely specialized segment for any given market. So they were able to make the argument, well, we're going to take advantage of this gap in the market that nobody seems to be going after right now. So again, it was just backing up their argument, and they were able to build a foundation from that regard. Now, if I were to ask you to evaluate the beer market, give me some criteria you could use. And don't tell me price and quality, because that's going to be the most common that you're going to see.
Talking light beer, or like
Yes,
regular?
light beer, dark beer.
Cans.
Absolutely. Could be cans or bottles, could be variety of product assortment within a specific company. It could be economy versus prestige. You could buy, say, a generic beer from the supermarket, or you can buy something that's 3 times the price that's considered an import, right? So you could evaluate the beer market in terms of prestige or economy. You could evaluate it in terms of product offerings the different companies offer. You can have microbreweries that offer 2 or 3 types. Then you can have Anheuser-Busch that offers 50, right? So you could evaluate the competitive landscape that way. It's up to you to map the industry. And that'll also give you an understanding of the case and of the environment that you're analyzing. Make sense so far? Okay. Those are both very relevant for this particular type of activity. Of course, there's a lot of other things you can use, from a financial point of view, return on investment, and so on. Break even. Have any of you familiarized yourselves with break even? Yes? What's the formula for break even?
Fixed cost over the price of my use variable.
Hey, that's good. That's good. Did everybody catch that?